Real Dads Lead. And welcome to Real Dads Lead. This is Dwayne Smith here, your host, and next to me, Mr. Matt Hamilton, my co-host. How you doing, Matt?
I'm great. Fantastic. How are you?
Great. Yeah, I'm doing really well too. Last night saw the movie Nefarious.
Mm-hmm.
You heard about that one?
I have. A little jealous. I've been going back and forth about watching it, specifically taking my sons, but yeah, I'm very interested in it.
Oh, it's good. I think your sons will like it. Yeah. I mean, it is rated R, but I do know why it's rated R.
Mm-hmm.
It's like at the very end, there is a death scene,
mm-hmm.
and they're pretty graphic about it. Other than that, I don't think there was any swearing, actually.
Yeah, I think thing. So I listened to the interview with Steve Dace, who wrote it. It's based on a book.
Yeah.
And
his book, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that he was, if I remember correctly, there was some discussion about how maybe that they felt that the R rating wasn't really appropriate compared to other movies. And it was kind of an attempt to deter some people from watching it.
Oh.
Maybe like a political attempt.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear that interview because he was talking a lot about the spiritual warfare that they were encountering and just making it. You know? I mean, it was pretty significant. A lot of different things that they had to go through.
Yeah, and I think he likened it because the same thing, if some people may remember the movie The Passion that came out several years ago, they had a lot of the same experiences.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he compared it to that.
Okay. Yeah. So it was fun. I'd recommend it to, I mean, not for little kids, of course, but
5, 6, something like that.
I'd recommend it for any believer. It was loaded with, I would like to watch it again with subtitles because it goes so quickly that I didn't have a chance to.
And there's so much dialogue, right?
There's so much dialogue.
So much to ingest.
And, and it's not slow speech. They're right on top of each other. It's very good writing. And so I went with my youngest son and his friend. They're both, I guess, sophomores in college now. I'm going to be sophomores in college. And they both liked it. So, and, one of my son is not a film major, but he's in animation and he's in the film school. So, but his thing is story writing. And script writing. That's what he wants to major in. So he's a storyteller, and he thought the writing was good. So yeah, recommend it.
Yeah.
So
and maybe one more thing to say, if anybody hasn't heard about it, or if they're, trying to decide if they want to go see it.
Yeah.
So it is Christian based.
Yeah. Yeah.
And interestingly, I didn't know this. This makes it all the more appealing to me, which is why I want to mention it, that he wrote it as kind of a modern day spin-off or sequel to C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters.
Right. You can tell.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, that's a classic. And if anybody's not read that, that's the whole, like, there's an older demon who has kind of a mentor demon. It's obviously purely fictional. Demons are born, but they're conversing back and forth about how to properly or successfully deceive this young demon's charge. This young guy that he's tasked to keep away from the Lord. And it just goes through all these cultural temptations, etc., and how to twist it in his mind. And it's genius. And so this is kind of a modern day version of that.
Yeah.
Super intriguing.
Yeah. Well, it's super good. So I'd recommend it at any rate. So we are on the chapter 4 of this Stepping Up called Courageous Manhood by Dennis Rainey. And hopefully you guys have been following along. It was a very, very, this is the, I'm getting you chapter. To me, it was really all right, we're not holding back any punches. And so today, I think we should do probably a 2-part for this. And I think today, I don't know if we'll get much past some of the real talk, the sex talk. So when I put this on YouTube or on the thing, I think that's probably the Birds and the Bees is probably kind of like the title, something to that effect.
Yeah.
So, but it starts off with a good quote. What is that quote that they had for that? Do
All right, so here it is. So the title of the chapter again is "What Robs Men of Courage," and the quote is, "Most of our obstacles would melt away if, instead of cowering before them, we should make up our minds to walk boldly through them."
Yeah. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, in context, the whole chapter is about these different obstacles that we face. We introduced last week, or rather he introduced in chapter 3, the different stages. And he said each stage has its own set of obstacles, right? And now in this particular chapter, he's going to bring up some of those obstacles that men in our culture face.
Right.
And obviously he's thinking some of this is going to really resonate. Maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe all 3 or 4 of these obstacles is going to resonate with you. And it's your job as a man to push through it, right? Instead of cower beneath it.
Right.
And when we stand up to those obstacles and decide we're going to push through, as the quote says, they kind of just tend to melt away.
Yeah.
Not that they're not difficult to push through, but they're certainly penetrable.
Yeah.
And if we're to be men of character and courage and leave that legacy for our kids, we have to do it.
Yeah, I think we might have talked a little bit about that in the last podcast. Just overcoming it once, then overcoming it the second time is easier. And the more you overcome it, the easier it becomes to overcome. So pushing through it, that first step is the hardest part.
Oh, yeah.
And that's pretty much of it. Anything that is an obstacle, but it does take courage to make that first step. Yeah, I like that. I like that quote.
Yeah. Let's talk about, do you want to talk about the story that it opens up with? Yeah. I love this story. Yeah. I think it's an amazing story. So what was the year? In 2003, Hurricane Isabel hits the East Coast. It makes its way upward towards DC, and it's so bad in DC that the president and Congress have to seek shelter. Right. They have to go to a safe place. He said it wasn't the case in the Arlington Cemetery. He said since 1937, these soldiers who guard the tomb of the unknown soldier have stood guard every day, every hour since 1937, which is crazy. So we're coming up in about 15 years or so, 14 years on, 100 years. Every day, every hour, they've been standing guard.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing sight. If you've never been, it's an incredible thing to see.
Have you been there?
I have, yeah. When I was little, and then we took our kids a few years ago, and they were mesmerized by it as well. So, and they take their job super seriously, right? So it was so bad that they were actually told that, look, you can step away. You can come inside, get out of this hurricane. And they refused. They refused. I mean, they stood there in the midst of this hurricane, keeping their duty, faithful to their call,
right?
No matter what was going on around them. I mean, that's an incredible thing. Yeah. And he says, what did he say? I'm going to mess it up. Oh, he says that's what a soldier does. He acknowledges the storm, but he doesn't give in to it. He stands firm.
Right.
And that's the thing. He's about to introduce a few different storms. And as you said, we're probably only going to get through one today. But there are storms in our life. Maybe it's the way that we were raised, whatever. We can acknowledge it.
Yeah.
But as good men, we're not going to give in to them. Right. We're going to stand firm. We're going to push through them and overcome them. And in light of that story, Dennis had a friend who said, if these men can stand guard over the dead, and I would add whom they don't even know.
Right.
How much more important is it that I stand guard over the living?
Right.
My wife and my children.
Yeah.
It's a powerful story.
Yeah, it is very, very powerful. I just think that men who have that much,
what's the word?
What is that word? It's just like conviction.
Conviction.
It is. Yeah. That much conviction of what they're doing is that important. And I cannot shirk this duty. I cannot, no matter what. I mean, a hurricane coming right at you.
Yeah.
And I might die, but I'm going to protect. And I'm, looking from the outside, you're thinking, well, what's the point? I mean, it's not, you're going to lose your life over something that doesn't really to me doesn't matter
Mm-hmm.
because you can come back and
Yeah, I mean, the dead soldiers aren't going to go anywhere.
Yeah, they're not
they're
going
in
anywhere.
cement, under the ground. Then nothing's going to happen to them.
Yeah, but it is that conviction of, no, this is why we're here, and to have that conviction. It reminds me a little bit of the story in the Bible of David, when King David took Bathsheba from Uriah, and he was trying to, once he got her pregnant and everything, he was trying to deceive Uriah into thinking it was his child or what have you, and just like, okay, bring Uriah here and make him, go and be with his wife, and he wouldn't go to his house at first. He was like, nope, I'm not going, because we are in battle. That is where I'm supposed to be.
All my fellow soldiers,
all my fellow
friends.
Soldiers, this is what they're doing.
Right. It wouldn't be right for me to enjoy this pleasure.
How can I go enjoy this pleasure for that? And then even as the next step was, well, let's get him drunk, and then he will lose some of that. But he had so much conviction that even mentally inebriated a little bit, just incapacitated a little bit, still had the conviction, no, I'm not going to, how can I do this to my country? And I'm thinking, man, to have that kind of conviction, I would love to have, and I probably have it in certain areas of my life, but I mean, I had to, sometimes if I put myself in those people's shoes, for me to believe that I would come out with the same result.
Yeah. I think that conviction has to flow out of a clarity of purpose, a clarity of vision and value for the task. And for whatever reason, I think we struggle to have that clarity in so many areas of our life. And to Dennis's point, I think that we struggle to have that clarity in our manhood and in our fathering. I think that'd be he doesn't go into it here so much, but I think it'd be a really interesting discussion to have later on. Why do we struggle to have that clarity? Why can we not consistently see clearly what our task is as a man? In general, and as a father, as a husband. Why can we not do that? Is it distractions, right? Is it cultural confusion, whatever? There's probably several factors, but I think that would be potentially a really fruitful conversation to have.
Yeah. Just off the top of my head, after watching that movie, Nefarious, part of it is that our battle isn't against flesh and blood.
Absolutely.
There is a spiritual aspect to it, and
that spiritual aspect is not just out there; it's in the walls of your home. It's insidious.
Very much so.
Yeah.
So the chapter then goes on. This is what really hit me. It talks a little bit about the
storm number one.
Storm number one, which is what?
Damnable training by fathers. Damnable training by fathers.
Bad fathers.
Yeah.
And they gave some good examples.
Specifically in the area of
sex.
Yeah, of sex.
Yeah. And it did give some examples. One was, a father took his son to a strip bar.
I can't, I've read it multiple times. We've talked about it. Even now, I just can't help but shake my head and wonder.
Yeah.
How in the world would you ever think that was a great idea?
Yeah.
I'm baffled.
Yeah.
And it makes me really thankful for the families that we grew up in.
Yeah.
Whether or not we had fantastic conversations with our dads about this or not, it's another level of poor parenting.
Yeah.
That dad had that would make him think this is how I need to introduce my son to this.
Yeah. Yeah. Because almost neglect, or, I asked my dad how he was, how his dad approached him with, the birds and the bees talk or what have you. And he said his dad never said anything to him. He learned on the streets, which is bad enough. But I think worse is a dad saying, "Hey, let's go to a strip ball,"
right?
And to totally,
you're not just hearing the evil from your friends on the street, but your own dad is inviting you into it.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And apparently, I mean, this is fairly common.
Yeah, it's not uncommon for sure. I think you were telling me there's a,
In Japan.
in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a common practice.
Yeah, I have a good buddy who lived with us for a while, and he said that it used to be the case in Japan that if a man got engaged, his father would purchase for him a prostitute before the wedding so that he could learn how to be intimate with his wife. How backwards is that?
Right.
I mean, it's laughable from a Christian perspective, but it just shows you how depraved a culture can become.
Yeah, right. So, and the second story was when a father dropped his son off at college, and he just handed him a bag of condoms,
a brown bag.
Yeah, he just says
with a
brown
box
bag
inside.
Yeah.
And he said,
"Don't be stupid. Use them." That's it.
Yep.
So I know what you're going to do. Just do it safely. And
right.
I mean, that's very, very common.
Talk about a low standard, setting the bar low.
There you go. Yeah. So how did your father, or did your father, talk to you guys about the birds of you and your brother?
You know what? I feel like I would need to ask my mom and my brother if I ever had that conversation with my dad.
Really?
Like, there's something. My dad really was a great dad in so many ways, and I kind of like vaguely have this very shady memory / feeling in a particular room in our house, our family room, where I think that we talked a little bit about it.
Yeah.
But it was brief, and I think it was one time.
Yeah.
And I just don't remember that much about it. Not that it wasn't impactful. I listened when my dad talked. He was a wise man.
Right.
But there's a lot of value in discussing it more than once. I was listening to a fantastic podcast yesterday about, interestingly enough, it was about pornography, but it was actually about how women are addicted to pornography.
Okay.
And she quoted someone that said, I think it was, rather than having a 60-minute conversation about sex with your kids, have 61-minute conversations with your kids about these things. Getting at, like, look, repetition. We need repetition.
Right.
We need to be constantly available to discuss these things, looking for opportunities, and also have such a relationships that our kid feels like he can come to us with any questions that he or she might have as they are exposed to things at school or wherever it might be.
Yeah. I like that.
It's not something we should shy away from.
No.
Right? It should be perfectly normal. We don't feel awkward when you ask it. This is a safe place. Yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah. My dad was determined, because his dad never said anything to him, that he was going to, for all of us, I have 2 other brothers, and make sure that he has that talk with us, and he did, and he grew up in rough times, but when they came here, when we were growing up, we were in church, and he surrounded himself with lots of godly men, older men who were able to give him wise counsel, and he grew up listening, not grew up, but fathered through the James Dobson kind of parenting topic stuff that he would learn from as well. So he said that he remembered it was like 11 to 12 type is what he remembers being told as the time frame, and he said he thinks I was about 12, and he said he started talking to me about the birds and the bees and the
who came up with that, by the way? What in the world?
No, it's a good
birds
analogy.
And bees.
Birds and bees, yeah.
How's that an analogy? Explain this to me. I don't understand. I've never understood. No,
really.
I probably look like an idiot right now. I have no idea.
Well, it's just that, I mean, how
just because they're different.
No, how bees work. What they do with the pollinating.
Okay.
So they basically take male parts and female parts of flowers, and they're the ones that do the pollination or insemination. It's basically the same kind of thing. So whether it's the male parts are called the pistil and the female part called the stamen, and
you can tell you used to be a teacher.
He used to be a science teacher. Yeah, this is a big thing for him.
Okay.
So I don't know where the birds come in.
Okay. All right. So there's a little bit of admission.
Right?
Okay.
No. I mean, it's just the idea that they're, especially with birds, you can tell the difference between the female birds and the male birds,
true.
especially like like a cardinal or whatever. They look different, and so you just kind of. I think that's how it started. But,
okay, so you were about 12.
Yeah, about 12, and he told me that just recently. I asked him, and he said, "Yeah, you were just grinning ear to ear listening to this stuff." Wow. I don't know why, but that's the age. But I mean, is there a good age? Do you think that? I mean, that's what Dobson says, but it seems like I think it should start. I mean, not necessarily the actual sex acts or what have you, but you should start. How you treat women, how you treat, how you should, for your girls, how you should be expected to be treated by boys or men or what have you.
That's a really good point.
Like a younger age, you can progress up to a point where, where the actual talk of the mechanics go in. But for more than that, I think it's the treatment of the opposite sex is more important than the act itself.
That's a really interesting thought. That it used to be early America that from a very young age, boys were taught how to treat women in their lives. Like there was just kind of a chivalrous code, that people knew and understood, and that's been lost.
Yeah.
And so I do wonder if treating boys at a young age, teaching them rather how to treat women is part of the problem there.
Yeah.
Not objectifying them.
Right.
As they get older. That's very interesting.
Yeah. I think it does help that you have boys and girls, so they have sisters that they can, it does help, but generally they have moms as well. So there's women in their lives that they need to be able to, we're talking about the boys, need to be able to, show the respect and show how you treat women, and not objectifying, like you said.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So is there an age, is your question?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that Dobson would say now, I've not heard him speak on this recently, but I think that he would definitely, at the very least, lower that age.
Yeah, right.
Because the average age now for a boy to be exposed to pornography is 9. And for a girl, it's 11.
Wow. That's
the average age. And like any average, there's people on either side of that, so there are girls and boys who are receiving it earlier than 9 and 11. So having that talk at 11 or 12, you're too late.
Yeah, right.
For the majority of kids now, unfortunately, you're too late. They've been exposed to pornography, to sexual things to one degree or another.
Right.
So I think it needs to happen sooner than that.
I do,
but it is admittedly a really tricky conversation to have. It's just so hard. Like how do you? It takes a lot of wisdom, and maybe we should just say prayer to know how much to say.
Yeah.
I think so. There's a series of books out there. I'll give you our experience so far. There's a series of books out there that they're designed for you to start talking about these things with your kids, I think really early, like kindergarten, even first grade, but it's like progressive, and we used one of those books early on.
Yeah.
Our kids were young. It was a hilarious moment. I mean, it was hilarious. We explained, I looking back on it, I actually think it was too graphic. I think it was too much.
Yeah.
At the time, it explained the act, and we had the counsel that we had received at that time said, you want to not lay it all out on the table, but you want to explain it, so that in the context of this is a God designed thing, it's something that's good, but it's only for married couples, and it's you don't want them, you want them to feel like it's normal, like there's nothing that is super mysterious about this or whatever. When we talked about it, there was a moment when our kids, they were all sitting on the floor. I can picture them. Their mouths, their jaws dropped, and their eyes went huge.
Yeah.
And a couple of them got up and just literally ran laps around the inside of the house, screaming wildly, like, I cannot believe what I've just heard. And I mean, I think I was probably crying. Like, we were laughing so hard. But like I said, looking back, I wonder if, because every kid is different, if it piqued some curiosity too soon in some kids, in conjunction with some of the stuff that they had been exposed to, like on their Kindles, you know, like had they not been exposed to those things and it was only this context, that may have been one thing. It's a composite. There's several things that came to affect it. So you got to be careful. I'm not giving an answer.
Right. I don't think there is a right or wrong answer, but I do think that in this day and age that, I mean, it will come out pretty naturally, and you just have to take those opportunities to seize it. So, I mean, it could be as simple as watching television or what have you, and a commercial comes up that's pretty, you know, sexualized, and you can see your son or daughter or whatever, like, that little jaw dropper, eye opening, their pupils dilate, and you're like, okay, we need to discuss.
It's making them feel a certain way. It's making them wonder, like, what's this all about? I think there's even something going back to the image of God, which has been a consistent theme on the podcast so far. That when we see it, there's something intuitively that's not right. Like, I shouldn't be seeing this now, or that shouldn't be happening.
Exactly.
Even though nobody's told us. And I can specifically remember things when I was a kid, little, that I knew were wrong that happened, but nobody ever told me that they were wrong. There's just something inside. It's the like I said, it's the divine image inside of us that just responds to that and knows that it's that something's off. I think, back to this podcast I was listening to yesterday, the woman who was addicted, she was asked, how would you prepare your children now prior to exposure? She's a mom now of a 2-year-old, so she's got a little bit of time, but she's had to, she's wisely started to process this. And she said something along the lines of, she would want to let her daughter know that there are images and things out there that are designed to damage you, essentially. I'm going to put words in her mouth, but what I was getting out of it was, these things are designed to destroy the way that you think about yourself, to destroy your relationship to God and to other people. Right. So if you ever, and these are her words, if you ever see something, whether it's on the computer or on a billboard or whatever, and you simultaneously are intrigued, but feel uncomfortable. Because I think it's a really good way of describing the way that you feel when you see something for the first time. I want you to know that you can come and talk to me. Please come and talk to me. And this was really important. She said, you won't be punished. You won't be punished at all. I just want you to come and talk to me about it. And I think that there's a lot of wisdom in that. She's not going too far. She's not going into the sexual act explaining it. You know, she's just at a young age, because they're exposed to it so young now, saying, there's these things out there. I want you to know that they're designed actually to damage you. And I want you to feel comfortable just coming to me and talking about it. There's not going to be any punishment for it. And I did want to say in this podcast, I want to make sure that we talk about this. I think that there's so much wisdom in telling your kid that if they either have a question or they see something that makes them feel that way, that they can come to you without punishment. That without punishment part is super important. And here's why. So she said that her mom actually did a great job talking to her about these things, but she still went on to become super addicted to it. She said that even though her mom did a great job preparing her, she never heard from her mom that she wouldn't be punished if she was exposed to it. Myself also, I never heard you're going to be punished if you come across those things. My kids never heard from me that you're not going to be punished. My teenage boys, they never heard you're not going to be punished if you come across these things. But they also didn't hear that you will be punished.
Hold on one second. Let's take a break. All right. So you were saying that they never heard that your kids never heard that they would be punished.
Yeah. So I guess here's what I'm saying. In her case, in my experience as a father, it's one thing to say, to prepare them and say, look, you're going to see these things. I want you to know that they're not good for you. They're not wrong. You need to be really careful, and leave it at that. It's another thing to add, in addition to that, to say, you can come to me, you won't be punished.
Yeah.
Or even, you're going to see these things, you can come to me. Without that, you won't be punished aspect. Here's the problem. You don't have to tell your kids that they'll be punished. You just have to not tell them they won't be punished.
Yeah.
I hope everybody's following me, because Satan comes in and he says, you will be punished. I mean, think about every time you do something wrong, that adversarial voice in your head, the same voice, incidentally, that was saying, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this, after you've done it, condemns you for doing it, right? And they make you fear the consequences of other men. If you're a kid, it's going to be of your parents. You can't tell people this. They won't love you. They won't forgive you. You're just going to get punished. It's going to be really bad, right? And the kid inevitably caves to that voice out of fear. We're inclined to be people of fear, not people of faith, because of the fall. And so they succumb to the fear and they keep it to themselves. And like any other sin, if we try to conceal it, we ache inside and we actually get deeper and deeper into that sin. Because as we've said before, Satan's ploy essentially is to divide and conquer. So he wants to separate your children from you, emotionally, mentally, relationally, spiritually. He wants to separate them from you, cipher them off so that they're an easier prey, right? That's what happens. So that's why it's so important to say to your kid, not only are these things you're going to see, I want you to know that you can come and talk to me, but you're not going to be punished, because then they are more likely, the chances are better for them to say, that's not true, to that voice that comes in and says, no, you're going to be punished. It's going to be really bad. You've done something so bad here. It can't be forgiven.
Yeah. The thing is that you also need to, there's a difference between punishment and consequences. And even if you are doing something that they may consider a punishment or a consequence, but you need to explain to them that this is designed to help you.
And she said
so
that.
If it's basically, we can't have you on the computer, or you can't have your phone or whatever, because it's right now you can't handle it, basically. It just has to be explained, because they may see it still as a punishment, but that's really not what it is. It's, a protection or a safeguard that you're trying to do for them.
And she said that. She said, you won't be punished, but I will set things in place to help you, right? To aid you. And that's really important. But to your point, how many times did you as a dad issue a consequence or set some kind of safeguard in place that your teenager did think was a punishment or felt like it was a punishment? That's happened to me and is happening to me. I feel like on a weekly basis. And it's really frustrating. It's like how they can't discern the difference, between punishment and
a boundary,
a safeguard, because for them, both of them are uncomfortable. Both of them are things that they don't want. Right. And therefore it's a punishment. They really struggle to see the difference there.
Yeah, that's tough. I do think that, I mean, with my kids, all of them have had, different struggles. And they've all come to me when they've had those struggles, especially in the sexual realm. Part of it is because they know my struggle, and they are comfortable enough to know, because I was comfortable enough to share that with them. But there was an aspect of, they wanted to come up with their own safeguards. How can you help me? Because they don't want to go down this rabbit hole. And so that was helpful, so I didn't have to, try and figure it all out. We could figure it out together. So different things that we did. But another aspect that was evident is feeling guilty, like how could I have prevented them from going down this path that
What did I do wrong?
was going down myself when I was younger, and I didn't want them to. I wanted to avoid, so I was doing things that would protect them, but I didn't do everything. Man, I feel guilty about that. And, I just had to realize that there's really nothing I can do permanently that beyond like going out and living with the Amish to avoid some of the things. And even if we lived with the Amish, I'm sure Amish people struggle with it. You go back to biblical times, they all struggled with it. They didn't
lust,
have
at least, yeah.
lust, yeah. So it's really more of a heart issue than the avenue, the medium.
There's something to be said for accessibility, though.
Yeah. There's something to be said for accessibility, but regardless,
the problem is ultimately the human heart.
It's the heart,
point,
and if you can't change that, even if you limit the accessibility, they're going to find ways to get it accessible. You can make it more difficult for sure, but at least in my experience, because I struggled big time, and as we've discussed, and I didn't have the accessibility, but I would make the accessibility happen. So to me, that was more when I was approached with my kids. We got to work on the heart. We can do other safeguards when we're talking about together, but it's the heart that we've got to work on. To get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know. We're in a society where it's like you said, super, super accessible. So it's very difficult to, as they're older now, I can't really control what they're looking at or whatever, but I can still have an impact as a dad on the heart.
Yeah.
I can still, urge them in ways to, stay in the word, express struggles, get with, make sure you're with good friends, stay in good company.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So tying it back into his point, this first storm that he brings up of damnable training by fathers, if any of our listeners have had damnable training, right, by their own father, and they have that obstacle there now because they weren't taken through it in the right way. Now they feel like I know I need to take my kids through this in the right, but I don't know how. We want to communicate to them, and Dennis wants to communicate to them that you need to stand up in this storm.
Yeah.
Right. Don't cower to it. Your kids can't afford for you to cower to it. And not just your kids, but their kids and their kids. Like you are potentially a generational changer here and shaper, because the wisdom that you pass on to your children, they can then pass on to others. If you either pass on to them the poor wisdom that your dad did, or no wisdom because you're paralyzed by fear or insecurity or whatever, then you're leaving them essentially to the winds of culture and to change. And that's not the kind of dad you want to be.
Right.
So you need to step up and face the storm. That I'm not going to let you push me over. I'm going to actually push through you for the sake of my children in every successive generation. And so that looks like, among other things, having those conversations kind of slowly but surely early on, letting them know. I would say probably when they're, first of all, I don't think that they should have screens. I mean, this is such a convoluted topic.
Yeah.
But I don't think they should have screens when they're 9, 11 at the age of exposure. That would probably take care of a lot. But either way, if like they're at their friend's house, which is where I was first exposed to a screen and pornography, whatever, once they get around that age or even a little bit earlier, 8, 9, 10, having those conversations and saying, look, there's things that you will see. Maybe it's on the computer, maybe it's on a TV, maybe it's on a billboard, and this depends on the culture you're at too. If you're in a city, your kids may be exposed to it more than they are out in the country. You need to know your kids and your surrounding and kind of make that discernment yourself, but say, look, there's going to be these images or videos that will make you feel intrigued, like what's happening there, but it's also going to also make you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And when you see those things, I want you to know that you can come and talk to me. They're designed to kind of hook you and trap you, and they don't have your good in mind. They actually damage the way that you think about yourself. Just to reiterate what we said before, they damage your relationships with other people, and they damage your relationship with God. I want you to know that you can come and talk to me about those things, and you're not going to be punished for them. I just want to talk to you about them so that we can work through those things together. I think that's a fantastic first step.
Yeah.
And then maybe as they enter middle school, or just before they enter middle school, 11, 12, you're beginning to have more of that sex talk, like what happens here. And there's lots of good resources out there that you can look into.
Yeah.
And then trying to maintain that open conversation.
Yeah, that's open. Key. And like you said, it's not a one-time talk.
Right.
Not a one-time talk, and it needs to be throughout. And we still talk. I've got one that's married and out of college and in college, and so we still have those discussions at times. They're not in depth or whatever, but it's just accountability and things to that effect.
Yeah, making sure that they know that you've communicated successfully, that you are for them, that you're on their side. That when they come with a question or even a failure, you're not going to condemn them.
Right.
You're not going to judge them. You're not going to laugh at them. Yeah. It's not going to be awkward.
Yeah.
And
again, in part, that helps when they know that you struggled with it.
I was just going to say, at a certain age, this is important. At a certain age, it's okay for you to say, I struggled with these things.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah. I think they'll get a big eye and a jaw drop for that.
And that's a little bit tricky, because it's like, here's my struggle with that. And I heard somebody else kind of tipping their hat to this same thought a couple months ago. If you reveal too much to your kid about your own failures, that voice that's coming into their head can be like, well, look, your dad turned out okay.
Yeah.
It's okay if you do this. If you cave in right here, you'll be able to get over it. God will forgive you. That kind of stuff, So it's I don't know. And you also want to maintain a standard that they feel like is achievable, and that you're calling them up to.
Yeah.
So that it's a little bit tricky.
Yeah, we can get into that more in the next podcast or another one. But we want to go ahead and close this one up because we are running out of time. And so it was a good conversation.
It was good.
Yeah, we'll do part 2 for this chapter next week and go from there.
Sounds great.
All right. Well, don't forget, real dads lead.